I looked indifferently at the plate of cold food that stood opposite me on the table and sighed heavily. It was another lonely evening as I sat alone waiting for my husband to come home with more excuses about how he had to work late. He hardly left the office during the Christmas and New Year holidays, and even when he was at home, he spent most of his time working. I knew he was working on a big project, but this was the ninth time this month he'd skipped dinner, and the month wasn't even halfway through. Looks like it's going to be another long and lonely month, just like January, I thought sadly as I took another sip of the excellent white wine I'd bought especially for this evening. I had just blown out 2 candles on the table when my mobile phone rang. I grabbed it and saw the name Stephen, my husband of 4 years, on the screen. Hello. I decided to answer the call rather than ignore it. Hi, Jessica. I'm sorry, but Carl and I are still working on this merger. He suggested we go to the Red Lion and get something to eat to continue our discussion. I took a deep breath, tears already starting to form in the corners of my eyes. So when should I expect you home? Do not wait for me. It will be late. We have another problem in the negotiations. When is it too late? I have prepared a romantic dinner for tonight. It's probably after midnight, and I'm sorry about dinner, but this merger requires all of our attention right now. If everything works out, we will ensure our lives. I will wait for it. I answered not without irony, wondering if the rest of his life with me was part of his plans. I have to go. I love you, baby. Okay. I hung up abruptly. One tear rolled down my cheek, and I wiped it away, blinking to keep from crying. This is not what I expected from my marriage, and certainly not what the first 3 years were like. Taking a glass of wine, I swirled the pale liquid in it before drinking it in one gulp, and let my thoughts wander to the past, remembering how I met the man of my dreams. I met Stephen Morton at a wedding where I attended alone as a bridesmaid, and he was one of the groomsmen. From the moment I saw him, I couldn't take my eyes off him and tried to find a reason to talk to him. We immediately hit it off. He was 3 years older than me and 27. Tall, 6 feet tall, with messy brown hair that always seemed a little scruffy. His piercing brown eyes captivated me. He charmed me from the first minutes I met him, and I was delighted when he invited me to dinner. However, my own deep-seated insecurities prevented me from even considering the possibility of a long-term relationship with him, at least at first. I always thought that I was too thin and inconspicuous for anyone to seriously want to date me. This uncertainty scared me away from the idea of serious relationships with several men I had briefly dated before. But Stephen didn't see me like that. He said his impression of me was as follows: a fairly tall girl, 5 feet 8 inches, attractive, with long dark brown hair that fell below her slender shoulders. Her slender figure with small 34B24-34 breasts made the dress she wore attractive enough to intrigue rather than show off, and she captivated him from the start. Although I was inexperienced with sex, having only had unsatisfactory experiences with 2 previous guys, I nervously slept with him on our 3rd date. We had been dating for 6 months before Stephen proposed to me, and I said yes without any hesitation. Fluctuations. At first, the marriage was even better than I could have imagined. We were crazy about each other and tried to spend as much time together as we could. The sex was great, and we had it every day, almost without exception, for the first couple of years. Naturally, the frequency of our love affairs decreased by the 3rd year, partly due to the general demands of life, but mainly due to Stephen's new job. We still had sex at least 3 or 4 times a week, but sometimes the intensity and passion would noticeably diminish. Then, just a few months ago, he got promoted and began working with his boss, Carl, on a huge merger project with another company. This required long hours and numerous business trips, sometimes for days at a time, and it had an almost catastrophic impact on our marriage. My husband and I haven't made love for almost 3 months because he was either away or too tired. Socialization had also become a rarity since Stephen was always working and, other than the occasional meeting with friends, it had been a long time since I'd enjoyed a night out. I sighed tiredly again and poured myself another glass of wine, holding the half-empty bottle in my hands and wondering if I should finish it. After taking a sip, I looked at the dinner I had been preparing for so long as a surprise for my husband and wondered why I was doing this. I stood up, grabbed the lovingly prepared meal, and calmly scraped the cold, congealed food into the trash can before putting the plates and cutlery in the dishwasher. After cleaning everything up after eating, I took my glass and bottle of wine and went into the living room. To disperse the oppressive silence, I turned on the TV, although I didn't watch what was on the air. Instead, I continued to think about what was going wrong in my life, staring blankly at the screen, tears streaming down my cheeks. I stared at nothing for the next hour until I had finished my glass, then poured myself another. Was it work, or had my husband already lost interest in me? I always appreciated everything he did for me, and as far as I know, I was a faithful and loving wife, so what's the matter? Taking my time, I eventually finished the entire bottle, dropping it as, somewhat tipsy, I staggered to bed and hopefully fell asleep, miserable and alone. I must have dozed off because I didn't hear what time my husband came home. This only became apparent when I saw the rumpled bedding and pillows next to me. In fact, I didn't even notice he came home until I heard the front door close as Stephen left for work the next morning. I carefully got out of bed, feeling quite queasy from the hangover from the night before, and headed straight to the bathroom to take a couple of aspirins and shower. When I returned, wrapped in a towel, I saw a handwritten note left on the bedside table. "Jessica, I didn't want to wake you because you looked so peaceful. Sorry about last night. Things are pretty tense right now. We're almost done. I'll be late tonight. We meet with the other party for drinks to finalize everything. Do not wait for me. Love you." I grabbed the piece of paper, looked at the note angrily, read it twice, and then crumpled it and threw it in the trash. I looked so peaceful. He didn't want to wake me up. Doesn't he understand what date it is? Looking at my reflection in the dressing table mirror, I realized that I was fed up with sitting at home alone, waiting for my absent husband. If he can be out of the house until God knows when, doing God knows what, then so can I. Having finally made my decision, I exchanged the towel for a robe and headed to the kitchen to make myself some coffee and plan the rest of the day. Looking sadly out the window at the morning sun, I wondered what Stephen was doing today. Where is he? What is he doing? The fact that I didn't even think about who he might be with was just a testament to the trust I had in the man I loved. However, this did not solve my problem of what to do about being left alone. A little retail therapy would be my first order of business, I decided as I sat at the kitchen counter with a cappuccino. I was going to go out and buy myself a new dress, a pair of shoes, and maybe even some sexy lingerie. I might also try booking a haircut and manicure. Now that I had made up my mind, I quickly finished my coffee and went back to the bedroom to get dressed. After I made the bed and quickly tidied up the house, I called the hair salon and luckily was able to get an appointment for later that evening. I quickly pulled my long hair into a ponytail and applied some light makeup, mascara, eyeshadow, and lip gloss. It was enough to highlight my eyes and satisfy my vanity, but not so much that I looked tacky while I was shopping. Choosing an outfit was a lot easier, and since it was going to be a warm day, I chose my skinny ripped jeans and a red cami top with my usual black lace underwear underneath. Looking at myself in the mirror, I felt my mood lift for the first time in weeks. Stephen might not have judged me, but I was determined to do something for myself and stop sitting around waiting for him. Having done everything necessary, I looked at my watch for the last time, saw that it was already 11:15, took my bag and keys, and left the house. There was surprisingly little traffic on the roads, and I had no problem driving into the city center in 20 minutes. planning along the way which shops I wanted to visit. After parking the car, I walked the short distance to the main street and looked around before starting my search for a new dress. It took me visiting several stores and small fashion boutiques before I found exactly what I wanted. The spaghetti strap dress was fitted at the bust with a deep V neckline that was held together by two shiny silver buckles. It looked elegant while showing off just the right amount of my modest cleavage. The skirt was unusual in that it reached mid-thigh at the back, but curved upward at the front, crossing at mid-thigh and exposing a significant portion of the leg. Very pleased with my first purchase, I decided to celebrate by drinking a cappuccino before continuing with my shopping. Walking up to the nearest coffee shop on Main Street, I discovered that I had to wait in a short line to place my order. Having placed my order, I took the cup and turned around, when suddenly the man behind me took a step forward and touched my arm. Most of my drink spilled onto the saucer and onto the floor. Unfortunately, some got on me too. "Oh God, I'm so sorry." A deep voice made me look up straight into a pair of deep blue eyes. "Please, it's my fault. Let me order you another one." Oh, thank you." Slightly dumbfounded, I could hardly answer. "Cappuccino, right?" the young man asked, taking the cup from my hands. "Please. Sit down and I will bring it to you." Blushing slightly, I sat down at an empty table and watched him. Tall and dark-haired, with an athletic build, I estimated his age to be in his early 30s, although he carried himself with a confidence that suggested he was considerably older. "I'm very sorry for that." He apologized, bringing me fresh coffee along with his own. "Do you mind if I sit down?" "Please sit down. And thank you." Waving my hand, I pointed to the empty chair opposite me, smiling at him. "Thank you." Sitting down, he extended his hand. "I'm Charles." "Jessica." As I shook his hand, I felt his fingers squeeze mine, holding me a little longer than was comfortable. "I'm such a clumsy idiot sometimes." He smiled at me charmingly. "I'm terribly sorry, Jessica." "It's okay. It happens." I felt a slight excitement in my stomach and blushed on my cheeks, looking across the table at him. But the consequences are not always so pleasant. If I hadn't run into you, I wouldn't be sitting here enjoying coffee with such an attractive young lady. I blushed even more at the compliment. It was very flattering, and the attention, even from a stranger, was something I hadn't experienced in months. I happily sipped my cappuccino slowly, chatting with him over our drinks as we both got to know each other better. "How is your shopping going?" Looking at my bag, he asked after a minute or two. "Well, I already have the dress. Now I need to find shoes and one more thing." I blushed, thinking about the underwear I was hoping to buy. "Oh yes, of course." Laughing quietly, I saw his piercing eyes sparkle with interest. "Ladies' underwear? Now you have really intrigued me." Laughing with a girlish laugh, I took another sip from my cup to hide my shyness. Unable to help myself, I wondered what it would be like to stand in front of him in the underwear I was planning to buy, and a warmth ran through my body at the thought. "Are you buying anything special for today?" His question brought me out of my thoughts and returned me to the present. "Oh, well, I hesitated, remembering my absent husband and his lack of attention in recent weeks. "Special meeting with someone, or a secret date you want to keep secret?" He winked at me, smiling mischievously. No, nothing like that." I faltered, feeling my cheeks heat up again with embarrassment. Confused by the way the conversation was going, I quickly finished my cappuccino and started to leave when Charles reached across the table to take my hand. I'm usually not so persistent. Looking straight into my eyes, he held my gaze. "But I really like you, and I would like to have lunch with you. If you have time." Stunned by his courage, I was momentarily speechless. If he noticed my wedding ring, he didn't mention it. I felt my pulse quicken and my heart pound in my chest, and I knew my cheeks were glowing even redder. Having difficulty resisting the urge to agree, I was eventually able to mutter an answer. Uh, I, I, um, I really shouldn't. I, I'm married. I see. He raised my left hand and looked for a moment at the gold ring on my ring finger. But it's just lunch, he continued convincingly. We both need to eat, and it would be nice to enjoy lunch in such an attractive and pleasant company. Well, uh, I guess that, um, like you said, it's just lunch. I hesitantly accepted his invitation, although I knew that I should have refused. Wonderful, he drank the last drops of his drink and stood up to join me. Shall we go? Having flattered his interest, I felt any resistance I had been suppressed, and, nervously, I gave in to his insistence. Taking his arm, I allowed him to lead me out of the coffee shop to a small bistro nearby. I knew it was wrong, and I should have said no, but I had spent so much time alone these past months while my husband was busy with work that I couldn't help but enjoy the attention this handsome young man was giving me. Opening the door to the restaurant, he ushered me forward, and before I fully realized what I was doing, I was sitting across from Charles at the table, looking at the menu. Perhaps you would like some wine. He distracted me from the menu for a moment. Oh, yes, thank you. Just one glass of white, please. He called the waiter and placed his drink order before focusing on the menu. If you like seafood, I heard the squid here is excellent, he informed me, showing that he didn't know that quickly today. Sounds great, agreeing with his proposal. I put down the menu and looked at my dinner companion. Then I'll join you. Charles smiled charmingly at me and placed his order when the waiter returned with our drinks. What are your plans for the rest of the day, Jessica? After shopping, of course. He calmly took a sip from his glass and asked about my future plans. I brought my drink to my lips, recalling my thoughts about the day, and thought for a moment before answering. My hesitation was partly due to wondering about his intentions, and partly due to the effect he was having on me. In the end, I decided to be honest. I planned to do my hair and manicure later, and after that I thought about getting dressed and going out into the city to have fun. Without your husband, I guess, he did not answer, leaving me the opportunity to make any assumptions. Somewhere in particular, he continued insistently after a short pause between us. I smiled, slowly regaining my composure. Not sure yet. Maybe to one of the big hotels. I heard that several bars were playing music. That's when food arrived at our table, temporarily interrupting our conversation. You know, these squids are really, really good, I confirmed after the first few bites. You've clearly been here before. Yes, it's really tasty, Charles agreed with me, and yes, guilty, I've actually been here before. I laughed, and we continued to discuss the bistro and the excellent quality of the food for the next few minutes as we ate. Finally finishing my meal, I put down my knife and fork and picked up my glass to take another sip. I really have to go. I need to finish shopping before going to the hairdresser. It's a big pity, he frowned. Maybe I can persuade you to change your plans. Oh, no, sorry. I need to get my hair done. I felt myself starting to panic. This was not part of my plan for the day. Being caught off guard in the middle of the day was not my intention. I wanted to pamper myself, glam myself up, and go out on the town. But now I was trying to resist the charms of a stranger who clearly wanted more than just a dinner companion. Are you sure? Your hair is already beautiful, he said, smiling, and I felt my pulse quicken again. Thoughts of how we could spend the day together filled my mind. I, uh, I, uh, I can't stay. I need to go. My loss, Charles smiled, maintaining his charm. Well, I'll keep an eye on you later. There are not many luxury hotels in the city with good music. If I were you, I'd try Marlborough. Thanks for the advice. I quickly drank the rest of my wine and thanked him, offering to pay half the bill, which he promptly declined. It's at my expense, as compensation for your company. "Thank you," I gave in gratefully, standing up and preparing to leave. Charles stood up too, and I was right in front of him. "Maybe I'll see you later, Jessica." I leaned over and kissed him lightly on the cheek. Perhaps, retreating, I smiled at him suggestively and took my purchases, leaving the bistro. Without looking back, I went outside. I could almost hear my heart pounding as I resisted the urge to turn and spend the day with Charles. I had a plan, and I was going to stick with it to meet my own needs and not anyone else's. Walking outside, I took a deep breath, looking around before heading to one of my favorite stores, Victoria's Secrets. Every time I go there, I feel like I could spend hours looking through the laundry, but today I didn't have time. After browsing through the racks, I was rewarded when I found a 3-piece set in green satin with black lace, and the garter belt had 8 straps instead of the usual 4. Having completed the purchase along with several pairs of stockings, I hurried to finish the remaining purchases. Shoes were the last item on my list, and it took me 3 stores before I found a pair I liked. The black 3-inch stilettos with the unusual double ankle strap were exactly what I needed. And after purchasing, I even had a few minutes left before my appointment at the beauty salon. I spent the next couple of hours relaxing in the chair while my hair was done. After cutting and washing her hair, the hairdresser styled it into a soft bun with lots of loose curls hanging around her neck and shoulders. I also got my nails done with extensions and a shiny black polish with silver stars. When I left the salon almost 2.5 hours later, with my bags, I felt like $1 million. I even pushed Charles out of my thoughts and felt much better thinking about the evening's plans. My trip home was uneventful despite the busy evening traffic, and when I arrived home, I immediately left my bags in the hallway and headed to the kitchen. I hurriedly prepared a simple meal for myself, not wanting to spend the evening drinking on an empty stomach, and sat down to eat. After I finished my light dinner, I headed to the bathroom to take a shower, being careful not to get my hair wet. Then, after drying myself with a towel, I sat down at the dressing table to apply my makeup, trying to look absolutely perfect. I applied the fake lashes first, carefully gluing them in place before applying mascara to make them even darker and longer. I then applied dark gray eyeshadow following the eyeliner, creating a flowing outline. Satisfied with my eyes, I added pink lip gloss to complete my look. Dressing was easy. I had everything I wanted to wear. After fastening the garter belt around my waist, I carefully wrapped a pair of black seam stockings up my legs, attaching them to the 8 strap clasps. I then put on the panties that matched the set, followed by the dress I had purchased earlier that day. Wearing a bra was not practical, and the crisscross pattern on the front of the skirt barely covered the top of my stockings. After putting on my new shoes, I fastened the straps around my ankles and was ready to go. I was checking my image in the mirror when the taxi I ordered pulled up and honked outside. Taking a deep breath, I picked up my purse and, calming down for a moment, walked out of the house, locking the door behind me before getting into the back seat of the taxi. "Where are we going?" The driver turned and looked me up and down, his gaze lingering on my cleavage before dropping to where my skirt parted, exposing my thighs. "To the Marlborough Hotel, please." "Oh, okay. Of course." He reluctantly looked away. I smiled to myself as the taxi pulled away, watching the driver adjust the rear-view mirror to look at me. Taking a deep breath, I decided to give him a little show and spread and crossed my legs again, letting my skirt open a little more to reveal the top of my stockings. He drove slowly, often taking his eyes off the road to admire me and hopefully avoid getting into an accident. Arriving at the hotel entrance, I paid for the fare, waiting for him to come out and open the door for me. Then I made sure he got another look at my bare thighs over my stocking top as I awkwardly stepped out of the taxi. The Marlborough was a grand old building with marble columns at the entrance and an old-fashioned revolving door that, due to years of underfunding, was in dire need of renovation. Its traditional splendor barely concealed the peeling wallpaper and peeling paint, which were clearly visible if you looked closely. Standing in front of the entrance, I felt my heart pounding in my chest and was on the verge of turning and running away as my courage had almost deserted me. But I knew I had to do it. I wasn't about to spend another night at home alone waiting for my husband. Somehow, I resisted the urge to run, pulled myself together, suppressed the rising panic, and walked through the doors into the hotel lobby. My heels clicked on the tile floor as I walked, holding my head high, ignoring the lustful glances of several men present, and headed towards the bar. Pausing at the entrance, I listened to the music of the live band on the small stage in the back while I looked around the room. Then I saw him, my goal for this evening. It was easy to distinguish him from other men. A little over 6 feet with an athletic build and slightly scruffy brown hair. He was in a group of 4 men, all in suits, deep in conversation. He was too busy to notice me standing in the doorway. Instead, he focused on what his friends were discussing. I watched him for a minute and then unobtrusively walked towards the far end of the bar. Being one of the few women in the place, I caught the attention of most of the men present as I walked gracefully between the tables, and although a couple of the men in his group noticed me, he did not turn around. Keeping him in sight, I was able to take a seat on the bar stool, carefully pulling down the crossed parts of my skirt so as not to show too much leg to everyone present. Once I got comfortable, I ordered a gin and tonic from the bartender, trying to ignore the lustful looks at me as I sat there, and it didn't take long before someone approached me. He was older, probably in his 50s, with steely gray hair, but looked very fit for his age. "Can I buy the pretty lady a drink?" I raised my head and batted my eyelashes in response. "That's very nice of you, but I already have it." But he did not give up. "Is this a temporary failure or a final one?" "Maybe later," I suggested, smiling at him sympathetically. "If we are talking about money." He stopped his sentence when he saw my look and realized that I was not the kind of girl who was looking for clients. "Oh, I'm sorry," he stammered and hurried away. Returning my attention to my chosen target, I watched as he walked away from his friends and headed towards the bar, apparently ordering another round for them. Making a quick decision, I climbed off the chair, not caring that my stockings were visible to anyone watching, and walked straight towards him. "Oh." He turned and stared at me, mouth open. "Would you like to buy the girl a drink?" I asked him, biting my lower lip, as modestly as possible, interrupting him when he was about to say something. I, yes, what? What would you, want?" He stammered, obviously completely stunned. "I'll have a gin and tonic, please, with ice and lemon." He was about to speak again, but I put a finger on his lips to stop him and smiled sweetly. "No names. Tonight we are just 2 anonymous people." Oh, right. Yes, of course," my crush for the night managed to reply, before turning and ordering from the bartender. "I hope your friends won't be offended that you're leaving them." I winked sweetly, glancing at him. He looked back at them. I have to." "Of course, if you don't want to." I left the sentence unfinished and looked around the bar. "No, of course, I'll just take this and, tell them." With these words, he took 3 glasses, leaving them on the counter, and returned to your small group. I sat on the bar stool and crossed my legs, carefully positioning the crosshairs in front so that only the dark stripes at the top of my stockings were visible. "You come." A voice behind me made me turn to see Charles, the young man from lunch. "Oh, it's you. Hello. I like the dress. I assume this is what you bought today," he continued, looking at me appraisingly. Thanks. "Yes, that's it," I replied, keeping my eyes on the man I had chosen as he talked to his colleagues. "So maybe I can buy you a drink?" Charles asked cautiously, noticing 2 glasses on the bar counter. I looked at him and smiled. nodding my head towards a group of men nearby. "Thanks, I'm fine. I just got some." "Ah, my defeat again," said Charles generously. "Well, if you change your mind, Jessica, I'm here a little longer." As I watched him leave, I took a sip of wine. Who was that? I turned to the man I had chosen when I entered the bar. Just someone I met today. I had dinner with him, and he wanted to invite me to dinner tonight. "Only for dinner?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I laughed and fluttered my eyelashes again. Oh, I doubt his intentions are limited to one meal. "I see. What are your intentions towards me, now that you forced me to buy you a drink?" I took another sip of the gin, scrutinizing it over the rim of the glass. "I think it's up to you. I wasn't planning on coming home tonight." "So, what if I book us a room?" Seductively spreading and crossing my legs again, I made it clear that the bottom of my dress was revealing a little more than it should have, revealing a glimpse of bare skin above my stockings. "Then we'll have to see what happens, won't we?" Biting my lower lip, I put my hand on his arm and offered it seductively. Taking out his phone, he dialed a number and began talking, apparently arranging for a hotel room, all the while looking at the sexy brunette sitting opposite him, who smiled invitingly at him. "Ready. We just need to pick up the key at the reception," he smiled at me, taking his own drink and taking a sip. "Won't your friends be offended that you leave them?" My eyes opened naively as I looked across the bar at the three men he was with. No, I'm sure they'll understand. We've mostly finished our business, and it's not every day that a guy gets seduced by an attractive young lady." "So, do you find me attractive?" He smiled. "You're kidding. You're just gorgeous." I didn't answer, just took a sip of the gin and tonic, emptying my glass, and smiled. "So," he licked his lips, clearly nervous in anticipation of what might happen. "Another drink?" "Certainly." I placed the glass on the bar and sat down, inspecting it while he ordered us another round. He really was my type: tall, athletic, and incredibly sweet. I was still looking at him when Charles' voice behind me made us both turn around. "Do you mind if I ask the lady to dance?" "Oh, no, that's okay." He looked between Charles and me, slightly embarrassed. "I'll be back in a minute. Don't go," I said, jumping off the chair, showing an indecent amount of bare thighs, and took Charles's hand. Looking back with regret, I saw his eyes following me as Charles led me to the small dance floor. Joining several couples, Charles hugged me a little closer than he should have. As we danced, I looked at my man at the bar, standing with a glass in his hand and watching us. "You look great tonight, Jessica. Are you sure I can't seduce you?" A whisper in my ear made me flinch. It seemed like forever since a man had given me any attention, let alone called me gorgeous, and it happened twice in a matter of minutes. I felt my heart begin to beat faster at the thought, and I allowed Charles to pull me even closer to him. I, I, uh, Looking down into my eyes, he continued, "I want you, Jessica. I want." "Charles, I can't. I interrupted him, trembling, not wanting him to finish the sentence, feeling my resistance weakening. "Why not? I'll make this night unforgettable." He raised my left hand between us, showing my wedding ring. "And that obviously doesn't mean much to you." "I just can't. I'm sorry." Gathering my last willpower, I rejected his offer. He retreated reluctantly, and I sighed with relief. "I guess you made your choice, Jessica. Have some fun." With these last words, he left, leaving me to return to the bar. "I thought you might have changed your mind." "Are you jealous?" I laughed, looking into his eyes. His smile sent a thrill of desire through me. "Absolutely. You're mine tonight." I smiled regretfully at Charles across the room as I carefully, albeit again showing my stocking top to anyone who was watching, sat down on the bar stool, despite the tempting idea of spending the night With Charles, I had other plans, and most of them were right in front of me. I like girls in stockings, he said, looking at my bare thighs. Most men like it. As far as I know, I adjusted my skirt to cover my naked body above the nylon. You're right, he laughed at my late attempt at modesty. Over the next few minutes we chatted, and I could feel the sexual tension building between us as I slowly drank my second glass of wine and flirted with him. How does your wife feel about you being here tonight? I raised his hand to look at the gold ring on his finger. Probably the same way your husband feels about you being alone in a bar full of horny men. Ah, touch, I laughed, letting go of his hand and fluttering my eyelashes again. And here we are, two married people with the whole night ahead of them. His gaze fixed on my eyes. Here we are, I whispered flirtatiously. So let's go to the room. He finished his drink and placed the empty glass on the bar. Or do you want another one? No, I'm ready for what you have planned. I drank the rest of my drink and carefully climbed off the chair, again unsuccessfully trying to hide part of my stockings and thighs in the process. Taking his arm, I let him lead me from the bar to the hotel lobby, smiling at his friends as we left to pick up our room key. Standing next to him at the reception desk, it was obvious from the look of the young woman receptionist that she considered me a girl of easy virtue who had picked up a client. The thought of her seeing me as an easy girl gave me a warm feeling inside, and I felt myself getting aroused. This is room 509. Sir, she barely took her eyes off me as she handed him the key, checking his credit card details. Is there a big bed? I smiled at her mischievously. I'm sure Madam will find the bed more than satisfactory. Her voice dripped with condescension as she answered me. I laughed and snuggled up to the man next to me. Okay, we'll need a lot of space. Keeping my hand connected, I looked at her and winked as we walked towards the elevator, my stiletto heels clicking loudly on the marble floor. You'll drive us out of here if you're not careful. What? I objected innocently. Do you know that? You and the receptionist just now. He laughed when the elevator doors opened with a characteristic sound. Walking inside, I turned to him. She deserved it, you arrogant cow. When the elevator smoothly closed behind us, I pressed myself against him, wrapping my arms around his neck and tilting my face towards his, pulling his lips to mine. We were still kissing passionately when we reached the 5th floor and the doors opened. Backing away, I blushed and looked down as we walked past an indignant middle-aged couple waiting for the elevator to go downstairs. What is your number, dear? Taking his arm, I laughed as we turned left, and he led me along the carpeted corridor to room 509. You're just insufferable, you know? He chuckled as the couple remained behind, heading down to the 1st floor. It makes life more fun. Shaking his head, he smiled and unlocked the door. Typical hotel room. It began with a short hallway that opened into a fairly spacious room with a double bed and a sofa, as well as a table and chairs. On the opposite wall, there was a lot of glass opening onto a balcony overlooking the twinkling lights of the city. The only other noticeable place was the small bathroom right by the entrance. Very nice, I muttered, looking around as he took off his jacket and walked up behind me, putting his arm around me to pull me towards him. Throwing his head onto my neck, I felt his hands rest on my breasts. Closing my eyes, I leaned back against him, enjoying the feeling of a man's hands on me for the first time in a long time. Oh damn, that feels so good. After very passionate sex, I headed to the bathroom. Stopping halfway, I turned to him. Oh, and happy Valentine's Day, dear. I just have one question, my husband asked. Oh, which one? How did you know where to look for me? Who said I was looking? I grinned cheekily and quickly disappeared into the bathroom. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.